Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second installment of Good Neighbors, ACYPL's effort to explore relationships with our neighbors north and south of the border. Earlier this week, ACYPL hosted an event with people discussing relationships between the United States and Mexico, and now we're pleased to bring you a program focusing on our relationship with Canada. So, like every organization, ACYPL has adapted to the times, and the format of our work has shifted to virtual engagement. We're committed to the mission of connecting political leaders and change makers around the world to address the many challenges we're all facing. Until it's safe, we'll continue to see you virtually and do these sort of virtual town halls, if you will. You can follow ACYPL's efforts in this endeavor on ACYPL at Facebook, also Twitter and Instagram. So keep your eyes there for updates as well as any emails. My name is Herb Tyson. I'm a current board member of the Canadian American Business Council, a former member of the board of ACYPL, former Clinton appointee in the State Department, and long-term professional in government relations and finance. In 2018, I was honored to host a delegation of ACYPL leaders to the Middle East. We went to Israel, the Palestinian Territories, and Egypt. Again, you see the firsthand value of exchanges and the impact it has on professional and personal lives. So ACYPL is preparing to send for the first time since the early 90s in 2021, a delegation to Canada. And it's an important, extremely exciting opportunity to revisit and connect with our absolutely strongest ally. We're thrilled to have Anna and Bruce with us today. I'll give you a sense of who they are. Anna served as president of the Liberal Party of Canada. Her leadership led to the election of Justin Trudeau as prime minister. She's been active in Canadian politics probably since she was 10 years old, I guess, so 20 years, right? After the 2015 election, she led a drive to open up and modernize the party. So she's big in small d democracy, if you will. Of also interest is she's a graduate from McGill and the London School of Economics. She's also from Montreal, and the riding there, that's the equivalent of a congressional district, if you will. Westmont happens to be the place where a certain person named Kamala Harris went to school as a child in Canada. So I think there's a whole lot of excitement looking at the next 4 years as we revisit this relationship. Bruce Heyman is a former U.S. ambassador to Canada. He served in the Obama administration from 2014 to January 2017. He was a member of the Fulbright Board of Canada and named one of the 50 most powerful business people in Canadian business. Long-term Chicago businessman, was with Goldman Sachs for many, many years, and is a graduate of Vanderbilt, both BA and MBA. And active in various, both Anna and Bruce are active in various philanthropies around their respective communities. I'm going to kick it over to them, but I wanted to note in the earlier conversation, Bruce commented about the mythical, almost storybook-like relationship between the United States and Canada. So nowhere in the world has this ever happened. And so they'll kind of tease some of those things. Clearly, it's been stress tested over the last 4 years, but we're going to tease this out. So can you guys provide for our viewers a context of the relationship for the last few years, some of the stresses, if you will, some of the high points, low points, and then how you see the future and how kind of we re-engage and reconnect after a challenging time. I'll kick it off to you, Anna, Bruce.
Bruce, go ahead.
Oh, gosh, I always would defer to you, Anna. First of all, Herb, thanks for that kind introduction and including me. And it's always a privilege and pleasure to share a platform with my good friend, Anna Gainey. And so we developed a really good family friends while Vicki and I were serving in Canada. So good to see you again, Anna, albeit virtually. We got to figure out how to get this border open so that we can, have a beer together or something else. Let's just talk about the fact that, in many cases and in reality, we can't pick who our neighbors are. I mean, countries are living next to each other for many years, centuries, millennium, but you can pick your friends. And we got really lucky here. And we got really lucky that our neighbor to the north happens to be also our best friend. And we can talk through here today, we can talk through the amount of trade that we do, which is enormous and balanced, and we make things together. We can talk about this environmental connection and the border of 5,525 miles, and how we're just deeply connected by rivers and streams and the Great Lakes, nearly 25% of the fresh water on the planet Earth. We can talk through the cultural exchanges we've had and the geopolitical exchanges. But at the end of the day, we're family. And more Americans live in Canada than any other country outside the United States. More Canadians live in the United States than any other country outside of Canada. And we're there for each other. And when we talk about these mythical, proportions of this relationship, it's true. I mean, where else do they make these movies like Argo, where Ken Taylor, then serving as the Canadian ambassador to Iran, harbored a bunch of American diplomats? I had the distinct privilege and pleasure of getting to know Ken Taylor before his passing, and also meeting some of those diplomats that were ferried out in this crazy scheme that was created. And then, of course, we have 9/11 and Gander in Newfoundland, and where so many planes were diverted into the small town where I think there were almost more people that landed there than even lived in the town. And yet they welcomed everybody in this most difficult of circumstances. And now, we have a Broadway show that is now, hit winning awards all around the world. And why? It's about this crazy relationship about Canadians who are there for us. And Canadians have been there for Americans. Look, I talked to Chris Christie, in the governor of New Jersey, and when Hurricane Sandy hit New Jersey, who were the first people that came in? The Quebecers came in to put up those electric lines to help rebuild after Hurricane Sandy. And then when I talked to Mitch Landrieu about in New Orleans after Katrina and came down right away, those are the Canadians that came down. And yet we find ourselves having this relationship that is deep-seated, long-standing. It's based on trust. It's based on honesty and partnership. And yet over these last 4 years, I think we have a president that looked at the relationship more on transactional terms. What are you going to do for me? And if you don't do this for me, I'm going to impose these pains upon you. Wow, not how you treat a best friend, neighbor, ally, and family. And I think that there was some damage done to that trusted relationship. People sit back and say, so what was the damage? We have a new trade agreement. We have all these things. What was the damage? Well, the damage was done to the trust. The damage was wounding a best friend that you've violated that trusted agreement. Trust is, you work hard to earn it. You can lose trust in a minute, and then it's doubly hard to earn back. And so I think the new administration is off to a really good start. I know Joe, he swore me in, and I should say the president-elect Joe Biden. And he traveled to Canada several times while I was ambassador. And I was with him in Vancouver, and I was with him in Ottawa. And I can just tell you this, he values the relationship. He values our allies around the world, but in particular, he especially values Canada. Who was that first call? That very first call to a world leader? That was Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada. And make note, we'll have our differences and we can talk through those and we'll figure them out, but we'll figure them out as friends and allies and sitting across the table and having an understanding of the different perspectives that we have. But the relationship will not be based on any one of these things. It would be based on those deep-seated values I talked about.
And I
Anna?
think, Anna, to underscore Bruce's comments, right? A lot of it, we may have a disagreement, but the fact that there was a total lack of consultation on a lot of those decisions kind of is how you destroy trust in a relationship. Anna?
Well, I think that there were a lot of lessons learned on this side of the experience of the last 4 years. I believe, as Bruce does, that the relationship and the friendship will endure beyond any one particular administration. I think the ties are very deep and historic, as Bruce outlined, and I agree with his assessment. I think that from this side of the, as I said, of this side of the border of the experience, it brought to a few things into focus. One was that the United States is not just encapsulated in the presidency. There are multiple layers of government. There are millions upon millions of good people who want to work together, who share the goals that many Canadians have. And, you know, this administration here looked to find those allies and build those relationships and branch out of just the Ottawa to DC dynamic that so epitomizes traditionally, you know, an international relationship. And I think that was a great exercise for our public service, for our government to build those relationships, to kind of go beyond looking at this as just that one way back and forth, and to see specifically how, you know, what kind of aluminum tariffs, what they would do to certain states and not just Canadian businesses, but then to go to those states, to go to those governors and those state houses and say, look, this isn't just hurting us, it's going to hurt you. And here's the math on that. And here's what that looks like. And that's been, I think, a really great, you know, sort of experience. It was difficult to pivot, but once the pivot was made, there was so much value in, you know, between our mayors, between our provinces. And so that's been one of the experiences that I don't know that we would have moved in that direction as aggressively as we had, but the circumstances sort of forced that. And I think in the long run, perhaps there are deeper relationships and better relationships at different levels of government today as a result of that we may not have had under different circumstances. I think the trust can be absolutely rebuilt. I think that Canadians, I know, breathed a sigh of collective relief in a lot of ways when we woke up eventually to the firm victory. It was, I'm sure, like many of you, going to bed on that Tuesday night was a little nerve-wracking, but we were all optimistic, and certainly, you know, I think the sense of just that this could, in this COVID year as well, with all of the stresses that have been borne by people, that to know in Canada that we would see sort of a light at the end of the tunnel, and that things could maybe start to go back to a more predictable rhythm and a more predictable relationship. And that's not to say, as Bruce said, it won't have its difficulties and challenges. I'm sure there will be those, but how you handle those challenges is, I think, what defines this situation. And I'm confident that, you know, the goodwill is here on our side to re-engage wholeheartedly and to move those things forward, that we can move forward better together. And as you alluded earlier, in particular, in my hometown here in Montreal, we're very excited, hopefully, to welcome the future Vice President back to Montreal, where she spent some formative years in high school. And just that connection alone, the excitement that has generated here, the anticipation of that, it's a big deal. You know, people are inspired, and we live in a very multicultural city. And she has inspired young Canadians as well as many young Americans. And so that, to me, is a nice example of what's ahead of us, I think, in a very optimistic light.
Can you guys just discuss a little bit about the border and its potential reopening at some point? How has COVID-19 impacted both the border closure as well as just the flow of trade and tourism?
Herb, when I was ambassador, I had a set of principles that I was going to work toward in trying to focus on, and they included trade, energy and the environment, geopolitical exchanges, and cultural exchange. But then as I traveled the country and talked to Canadians in every province, there was one thing that almost every Canadian said to me, and they said, just don't mess with our border. Keep it open. Keep it open. And so business people wanted it open for business. Families wanted it open to visit each other. Students wanted it open to study on both sides of the border. Tourists wanted open on both sides, to come visit either second homes or go on vacation. And that border, just so you have a sense, that while I was there, we were averaging around 400,000 people a day crossing our shared border at just under 120 border crossings. So there are airports, there are border crossings, and since 9/11, we actually tightened up a lot of our domestic security through Homeland Security, but also that impacted that Canadian-US border. And we were looking for ways to continue to provide American security while at the same time providing as open access as possible. So there are programs like the Nexus program, which gave fast pass for people who had background checks. We had pre-clearance so people could go through customs in various parts of Canada, and we expanded that during the Obama administration. So here we are today. The concept to me of this border not being open to what some people deem non-essential, but if you're a small business person, if you're a restaurateur or a hotelier, or you just have a fishing camp or whatever it is, this is important stuff. This is essential. And unfortunately, because of this pandemic, and in large part, I think the way it was handled on our side of the border, made it more risky to travel across the border with each other. And so I think this has really impacted people psychologically and emotionally at the family level. It's impacted people at the business level and small business level, but it's something even deeper. You see, what binds people together is the ability to sit down and build those personal relationships. And when you break that and you keep people at a distance, those relationships then, grow a little stale, little older, little harder to keep. Now, Zooms can do it like this, but in reality, we're going to have to rebuild that once this border reopens. And hopefully, with this vaccine and the things that are happening, we can get that done.
It's really unprecedented, the border closing. It's something I think many of us would have never anticipated or expected to happen, and holistically from one end of the country to another. Big change for many Canadians, especially those living, say, in Windsor, who many nurses, many frontline workers live in Windsor and go to Detroit to work. Slowed that down. There's just the intricacies of day-to-day lives for some people who live on the border have really been disrupted. And yet we're kind of being called at this time to serve a greater purpose and to make sacrifices and to slow the spread and to protect our vulnerable and our frontline workers. And so while I don't think anyone is particularly pleased about this or the pandemic or the reasons that the border is closed, everyone kind of, I think, understands at this point why we are doing this. And we're optimistic that, it will, as soon as it can be opened, all parties will want it to be opened. And frankly, at this point, the cases in certain regions here are, the infection rate is as bad as it is in many places in the US. It isn't, we've gotten to a point where early in the spring, we seem to have been containing it a little bit better here, and in particular in the Atlantic provinces where they did their own kind of bubble, even within Canada, of limiting travelers to coming to the East Coast. It seemed to be working in part. The perception was that it was helping us keep our cases down and protect our healthcare system. And at this point, there are, as I said, there are regions that are really facing tough situations with COVID right now too. So I think it's going to have to calm down on both sides. People need to feel like, we're not taking those frontline workers for granted, and that we're still doing everything we can to prevent the spread of COVID. The vaccine should make a huge difference in so many ways in restoring that faith and that sense of security and safety from a health point of view. So It has impacted tourism. It has impacted business. It has impacted people's family, everything. This is just not fun. COVID is not fun. The border closing is just one more piece of that sort of weight of it all. So there will be enthusiasm for reopening it when the time is right. And we're going to have to just trust the political leadership on both sides of the border to come to an understanding as to, when that time is. And we'll just have to wait and see. I suspect it will be into 2021 at this point anyway.
Bruce commented about the how it was handled on this side of the border in terms of COVID and its impact on the border. Between us and a few hundred of your closest friends, how do Canadians, Anna, really feel about the state of the relationship now, and what are your hopes and expectations for the future?
Look, I think the relationships, because it is as right down to families and small businesses and the things Bruce described, I think the relationship overall is still very positive. It is, neither one of us are going anywhere. The incentive and the motivation to continue to work together to improve the quality of life and trade and all of these things on both sides of the border. I have no doubt the will and the desire is still strong in there. And with a ready partner, Canadians will be right back at it. No one's going to skip a beat here. It will be back to smooth and relations as we would hope. And obviously we'll tackle those problems when they come. But I think Canada is optimistic about the shift in the United States. And I don't think, like many Americans, I would assume we're not under any illusions that some of the challenges that exist as a country there are going to be resolved very quickly or overnight. I think we have some similar challenges here that we understand to be systemic and deeply kind of rooted in our institutions and structures, and we're going to work on those. We are working on those things as well. So, I think having a good dynamic between the White House and Ottawa is super important, and I see that coming quickly, and that will set the tone in a positive way, I think, for the relationship going forward. Climate change will be a big one, I would say. If there was an issue going forward, I think it'll be a big one in terms of opportunity and also some challenges in the framing of something like Keystone, the pipeline, for example. That will be perhaps a sticky point, but the opportunity to work together to advance robust climate change agenda is also there to be grabbed. And
I think that's a great topic to kind of drill down, no pun intended, a little bit. But can you comment, both of you, about climate change and how you see it moving forward in terms of the bilateral relationship? And maybe is the Prime Minister constrained, having lost his majority in 2019? Politically, are his hands a little more tied? I don't know.
So let me just address the climate change aspect of it for a minute. And Anna is exactly right with regard to the opportunity set and being much more aligned, I think, with this new administration relative to where we were over the last 4 years. One, make no mistake about it, it's a very, very strong signal when you select someone like John Kerry, who is former Secretary of State and presidential nominee for the Democratic Party and a longstanding senator and somebody who's dedicated his whole life to be effectively the climate change czar in the National Security Council. And then number two, to hear Jake Sullivan, who is the national security advisor of the president, to say that we are going to look at national security of the United States in a new and different way and think about things like climate change and a pandemic as national security issues for the United States, as opposed to traditional security issues. And then having Brian Dees come in the economic side and his long background in climate. If there isn't a strong message that everybody has not picked up about Joe Biden and this administration being focused on climate change, you are missing something dearly, that both in the policy statements that they've made already and in the selection of talent and people, that is going to be a key focus. And then we also note that the team around then candidate Joe Biden specifically made an announcement about Keystone, and they're not wanting to approve that. And the only thing I can say in that regard, having lived with Prime Minister Harper in Keystone and Prime Minister Trudeau, and the communication that came from the White House during that time period, I can say that you should take Joe Biden's word for it. And everybody's sitting there asking me, does he mean it? Does he look at it? I would say, yeah. I would assume yes. The words coming out of that group, and based on the selection, that they're going to take climate change very seriously and diminish our carbon footprint, and things that enhance, building a carbon footprint, making it larger, they're going to diminish those. And so I have no particular insight other than having some PTSD over Keystone. But other than that, I would just say I'd take their word for it.
Anna, where do you see climate in Canada and how it interplays with the US? I mean, on one hand, you've got Alberta and its push for the pipeline. The other hand, environmental policy. That's a delicate dance to play, right?
Yeah, it is, and it's not new here. That is a regional dynamic that has existed for many decades now. So it's something that we domestically will manage, both politically and in terms of balancing the needs and the needs and wants and the perceptions of other provinces. But I think Canadians are overwhelmingly unified behind fighting climate change. There's some differences of, how to do that, which emerges again in that regional perception or regional point of view. But I think that there will be enormous appetite here for American leadership through, back into Paris and how we go from there and what is next. And then all the things that we can do between our two countries, just, even beyond just within, there's the international commitments, but then between the two countries, what can we do to advance these goals and to, take climate change seriously? I agree with Bruce. The signals from the incoming administration are very strong and positive that that's a priority, and there will be a reception for that, very receptive group of people here ready to get to work on areas that we can easily cooperate and advance that agenda.
Herb, I think it's really positive. And I think that there's so much in terms of job creation that can take place, innovation, propel us technologically to a new place. And you're watching this emergence now accelerating of electric vehicles, and the changeover from gasoline powered vehicles is clear and evident where the manufacturers are going. And so we are seeing coal usage at, kind of generational low levels, and nobody's building new coal-fired electric plants today. And, I would say that, Joe Biden, from his words and his actions, will probably say we need to continue to maintain for now strong and for national security reasons and for economic reasons, strong pipelines of energy coming in for current consumption of fossil fuels, but also new pivoting and new investment are going to go to alternatives, and so that we can meet our Paris commitments, and we can continue to move together collaboratively. I think there's a lot of opportunity here.
You guys want to quickly comment on the trade pact, the U.S., Canada, Mexico trade pact, and how it has impacted our relationships and then, economic potential down the road?
2018 here on our government side, it was quite a year. I mean, when I think about the energy and the effort and the focus and the time that went into renegotiating that trade agreement, it really became just a huge piece of the pie of this government's time and energy. It was a huge priority, so important to get it right. And it took a lot of effort. I mean, if we could put that kind of effort into climate change over a 9, 10, 12-month period, who knows what we could do. I mean, that was a huge exercise. I don't know, I'm not a trade, negotiator or specialist. I feel like the perception here is that not a lot changed. We did a lot of work. It took a lot of time, as I said. And at the end of the day, it doesn't look all that different, not in a way certainly that, people I know are really feeling it. There were certain industries that really became at the pointy end of it, whether it was dairy, for example, or maybe aluminum, but I think we've moved past it. It was quite an undertaking on our side, but trade up until COVID seemed to be kind of right back to normal and growing, and so I hope that trajectory continues, and I hope for both sides that we don't have to renegotiate that trade agreement again anytime soon. It was a massive undertaking.
You watch from afar that unfold. I'm sure you're glad you weren't in Ottawa, Bruce. Any thoughts on your end?
Well, look, I didn't like the tactics that the president was deploying. He was treating Canada more like a cement contractor on a construction project, threatening them, with steel and aluminum tariffs, and I'm going to squeeze your auto industry. And he storms out of multilateral meetings, and name calling at the highest levels coming from the White House, and at the end of the day, I think Anna earlier talked about how well Canada came together as a country and negotiated this, and at the end of the day, I think Canada did as good a job as any country could do under the circumstances. But by doing it in a collaborative way across party lines. And, I was in a conversation recently with Rana Ambrose, and, having conservative members and liberal and NDP and environmentalist and mayors and, heads of, your different provinces at the premier level, all coming together was very good. So let me just say this, though, and I think this is going to be the rub on USMCA or CUSMA or, whatever each country is going to call it. The most consequential change that occurred in that agreement actually happened with Mexico and labor provisions and how labor reforms will need to take place. And I think as this time goes on, the focus is not going to be on the structure of this agreement with Canada. While we'll have our differences, and whether the differences as come up in dairy or softwood lumber or different things, it won't define the agreement and run out and say, oh my God, we have to change this whole agreement and do that. But the agreement very much is pinned on fair pay, labor organization, fair working environment for the Mexican labor force, which provides, a balance in terms of so we don't lose the kind of jobs that we had to, people who are in poor working conditions and being taken advantage of from Canada and the US. And so my bet is the focus will not be on this agreement with Canada. Maybe the implementation aspects will come in focus, as we said, like dairy and other things. But the real big focus is going to be on this agreement, will be with Mexico.
Can both of you comment a little bit on the future of NATO and kind of the stresses that it's been under in the current environment, and what you perceive as opportunities for either strengthening or enhancing down the road?
Look, I think the relationship between our armed forces is also one that we probably don't share and celebrate enough. The interoperability, deployments where we work together in places like Afghanistan under tremendous stress. The relationship there is also very strong, and I'm sure underwent some strain as well in its own sort of framing over the last 4 years. I don't doubt, though, that with everything else, as we've said, that relationship will recover and be reinvested in many times over, and that includes in NATO, where the discussion around contributions and how we measure them and who's paying in enough and who isn't, it's always sort of been under the radar, but the last few years really just brought it out front and center into the public domain in a much more kind of blunt way than you would normally see in sort of diplomatic circles, like NATO is when it's heads of state or defense ministers meeting like that. So I think the future of NATO is strong. I think Canada is committed to NATO, and the work that NATO does on building interoperability, on building relationships, on working in certain parts of the world together, I think it's very important. And the investment and the commitment here is unchanged. I believe it will remain so. I don't see any threat to NATO from a Canadian point of view anyway.
Bruce, any thoughts there?
You know, peace since World War II, you know, around the world has been an important factor for the United States. And doing it alone is not the way we got it done. And doing it with partners and allies and coming together. You know, there's Article 5, where Article 5 under NATO says we're going to go in and defend any member who is under attack. Well, what is the one time that Article 5 has really been exercised? That's when the US was attacked, and that NATO came together to respond to that in Afghanistan. And so the reality is that NATO is critically important going forward. And I know, as a president, Joe Biden thinks about the world in a multilateral format, coming from the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, coming from being vice president, coming from, you know, the window in which he had of the world, and the people around him, especially Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan and others, are multilateralists. And the greatest multilateral, you know, working relationship that we have, I think, is NATO, especially on the military side. And so I envision that will not only be reinvigorated, but, you know, maybe reoriented in a way that takes into consideration the other threats that take place, such as cyber, and such as, you know, look, we're living in a new world where it may not actually be as much as troops on the ground, and maybe other ways in which people are combating each other, and we're going to have to deal with that. Look, we've seen, you know, Russia attack the United States now multiple times during our election process. You know, how long do we let that just go on without responding? And how do we respond? I think that, you know, that may be a role for these multilateral organizations coming together, because no country's immune from that kind of, you know, attack.
And I'd be interested from a Canadian perspective, what do Canadians view as their largest international threat? Is it China? Is it Russia? Is it what? I mean, where are the challenges happening from a foreign policy standpoint? We'll follow up and get into Huawei and some of those other kind of difficulties, but go ahead.
The biggest threats, I mean, I think that that's a tough question. I don't know that we feel tremendously threatened on a regular sort of basis here. I think we have issues and challenges with certain regions and countries that are probably not dissimilar to the ones, you know, from the American perspective. And I think, again, going back to Bruce's point on multilateralism, that's why, you know, something like NATO is so important, in particular for a country the size of Canada's, is we're going to be much stronger and much better placed to, you know, defend against those threats, no matter where they're coming from, if we're doing it with allies where we're sharing intelligence and where we're exchanging our armed forces so that we learn to work together in crisis type situations. So I think there's all kinds of, you mentioned China, but I don't think that we don't feel threatened particularly by China. I think that there are issues there that we wish, were being resolved or were handled differently, but the threats are climate change. I mean, this is the existential threat, and the social justice, implications of that, and migration. We watched our first election was turned on the images out of Turkey of a young boy who had roots and connections in Canada who was found drowned on a beach. And those are the issues that I think, the welcoming of, I think, thousands of Syrians also in that first term. So those threats that that bump up and spill into our borders, even though we don't share the border, we have huge multicultural, populations and communities here. And so when things happen abroad, we feel it through those communities living in Canada, like in Lebanon with the explosion and the pressure to respond and act and support Lebanon in that time. And our foreign minister was one of the first people, I think, after President Macron, who was visiting Lebanon after that explosion. So I think the threats around the world impact us, although we don't necessarily feel them because of our geography. I think we don't necessarily feel them on our borders, but the ones that are being felt by Americans, I think, are also felt by Canadians. And we feel lucky that we've got Americans next to us. And I think we know we can rely on to help us out if there was ever a real threatening situation.
Bruce, you mentioned the Russian issue in terms of the elections. Where do you see the challenges for the foreign policy team going forward, whether it's China or Russia, Iran, whatever? How do you see some of those playing out?
So let me just first say that I think a President Biden is going to enter this presidency in the most challenging time of maybe any president, with the exception of maybe Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War process in our country divided, and maybe FDR in the Great Depression that was taking place. But we have a president who's entering during a pandemic. And while we have a vaccine on the horizon, in fact, quote, very close up, but the implementation of that is not without immense degrees of difficulty. We have millions of people who are out of work. We have a racial divide that is, being stoked by a president that we currently have. We have a sitting president who's delegitimizing the president-elect every day and going in a way that has historically never happened. And then we have the infrastructure of the US government, where I call it little fires and big fires have been lit all around the infrastructure of the US government. And simultaneously with that, we have lost a lot of great quality civilian workforce within our government who have just said, I can't take this anymore, I'm out of here. And so they're going to have to rebuild domestically. And from a foreign policy perspective, the first place to do that is the State Department, and making sure that we have the quality of people that we need in place around the world. And, they're at the State Department that can implement the policies. The other thing is that I think we're going to find a lot of our allies who were shunned by the sitting president are going to be looking for additional attention. And so there will be a lot of allies raising their hand and saying, hey, I want to be back engaged with you, which will eat up a lot of time during a presidency that is going to, looks like, might even have some challenges if we don't change the Senate on terms of just building out his team. And so I think that the following on challenges, though, geopolitically, have to be multifold. And so Russia, China, in working out our Chinese policy going forward, in dealing with the balance of how they're treating human rights, what's happened to Hong Kong, how they're treating Canada, how they're treating others, and then the trade aspects of that. North Korea has more nuclear, capability today than when the last president left. And so that is continuing to be an issue. The Iran nuclear agreement was walked away from, and the complexities of that region will rise to fore. And so, and then of course we've got all the issues in Latin America and Africa and elsewhere in the world. And I think this foreign policy team will have its hands full, but I am so confident, because I know so many of them so well, so confident that these are the right players at the right time that can take this challenge on in a way that will rebalance. And inevitably, you'll get tested in some way that you don't anticipate. And so how you respond to that. And I have a lot of confidence in this team that they'll be able to come together and respond quickly and effectively. Make no mistake about it. I think that this current sitting administration is going to try to make that as difficult as possible for his successor. And he's doing it every day.
And we've had a comment from the former executive director of ACYPL who lives on the Canadian border, and he wants a date certain when you're going to open up. So he cross.
Anna has that date. I don't know if she's going to share it with us today, but I know she knows.
My crystal ball here on my desk. I wish I knew. I mean, we have a property, a home in Florida, and that we visit regularly. We typically see my dad there in the winter time, and all of these things are just off the table right now. And we're all feeling it. We are really all feeling it, and I just really hope that these vaccines turn the tide on this pandemic, and we stop losing people to this horrible virus, and we can get back to crossing the border freely, which we love to do. We usually just hop in the car and go down to ski in Vermont for a day and come home, and it's great. But not this winter, I don't think.
Bruce, the U.S. has not had an ambassador in Ottawa since 2019. Any advice for the next U.S. ambassador to Ottawa?
Sure, and I'll share advice both that I received and that I learned along the way. So the first piece of advice that I got when leaving for Ottawa from the U.S. after my swearing in by Joe Biden was, you are not the U.S. ambassador to Ottawa. You are the U.S. ambassador to Canada. It's a big country. There are a lot of different constituencies. Go visit the country, see it for its beauty, but also see it for its opportunity that you have to work together cross-border. And we traveled every province and territory in the country. Amazing. You must do that if you're the next ambassador. The second thing is that regardless how small you think something is, someone else may look at the same thing and it can be really important to them. And so you shouldn't dismiss it just because you think it's small. You should listen and understand why they think it's big. And so understand that. And the last thing is, two people can look at the exact same thing and see it entirely differently and both be right. And so you need to be able to take that into account from a diplomatic perspective, but also historically, sometimes Americans go out and think, this is our lens, this is the world I've come from, this is the way it is. Take stock, listen, learn from Canadians. They have a lot to teach us, but in a lot of ways, but understand their perspective before coming to any definitive conclusions.
Excellent. Any questions from the audience you'd like to hear from Bruce or Anna? Because we can go all day.
Almost.
I see it in the chat. Someone is asking me, what are the big domestic policy issues in Canada that Americans might not be aware of? I think right now the big domestic policy issue is the pandemic and coming out of that strong. So the focus of the recent economic update that Minister Freeland gave in the House of Commons was on, do we have an opportunity here to build back better? And I hear that language also being used in the US right now. And so domestic policy, a focus on a national child care program has become more pressing, although it is not necessarily a new idea. It is at the forefront again, due to what in a large part we're seeing is more women out of work due to the pandemic, more women having a harder time, especially women with children going back to work with the unpredictability of schools and the lack of childcare. So childcare is going to take you know, some space up in the Canadian domestic policy agenda, as well as setting national standards on things like seniors' homes, long-term care homes, because we've seen obviously the impact of the pandemic on those assisted living facilities and the people who work in them. And clearly that is something that has just not had the attention that it clearly requires. And we've learned some very tough lessons, or I hope we will learn some very tough lessons. And that, and the interesting thing about that, just for the Canadian context, is that, you know, the way our country is with the division of powers, federal and provincial, is that the responsibility typically of childcare and education is in the province, and healthcare as well. So the way of trying to drive a national agenda on these things is to work with the provinces, and that's can be easy and it can be difficult. Again, it comes down to relationships and personalities and then different perspectives. We alluded a little bit to that earlier. And so while we may have lofty ambitions and goals, it can be difficult to bring about national standards and national programs that fit in every region and every province of the country. And those provincial governments will be there to, you know, really reflect the local needs. Quebec already has a daycare program, for example, and probably won't want to hear from Ottawa as to what their childcare program should look like. So that is a theme of Canadian politics, is our federal structure, and it's going to come into focus as we rebuild better and as we try to bring about systems and services that will help people come out of this pandemic. And we will be tested in our resolve to come together and work together across party lines, and to make those things happen for Canadians, because I think there is a lot of agreement on where we can do better.
Well, 9 months into this pandemic, the US had one stimulus package and what were it, $1,200 checks to citizens. Canadian federal and provincial governments have offered aid to businesses, rent assistance, as well as having good health care. So it seems like the social safety net in Canada was substantially more robust. So there's less, not that there's not stress, but less stress points socially on the country and economically on citizens in terms of fearing of people losing apartments or businesses going under, that kind of thing. How much longer do you think the federal and provincial government can continue to support Canadians?
Our federal government has said very clearly it will do whatever it takes to support Canadians through this pandemic. We entered this, again, I'm not an economist, but I believe we entered this difficult chapter in very good financial footing and sound metrics as to what, you know, economists would use to measure what we can spend and how we can invest and how we can support Canadians through this time. And I don't see the federal government taking its foot off the gas if it comes down to ensuring that Canadians are taken care of, and the things that you know, helping them pay their bills and find the childcare, that will be a priority for as long as it needs to be. It will, you know, there's debate and discussion as to, you know, is this kind of spending sustainable? And the government is making a strong argument at this time that it is sustainable, and that not only that, but we have to do it. We're not going to leave people behind in this situation. So, you know, I think again, the vaccine and hopefully the warmer weather in the spring, it's going to be a tough winter here, and we just have to stick together and do what we're being asked, which is stay home and not travel, and hope that by springtime there's some relief on the pandemic front, and that businesses and people can get back to work. And yeah.
Can you comment on the healthcare climate in Canada? I mean, is there a huge population that's unserved by health services, or?
Yeah, there are. As you get into rural parts of the country, obviously the universities that anchor so much of the research in the hospitals are in the big cities, many of them, and it goes out from there. But so if you get into the north, like into Indigenous communities, there is definitely strain, and it is difficult to serve those areas, particularly in the winter. It's dangerous to fly and to travel and in the climate that we have at certain times of the year. So they're remote, they're hard to get to, and they're underserved to begin with. This is one of our biggest domestic challenges that this government has been focused on, which is reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. And that includes not just healthcare, but clean water and lifting boil water advisories, and trying to make right for a very difficult past that it's a big task. But those are the areas that I would say where the healthcare is really thin, and in the big cities not so much. I think that there's access and service, and people don't worry about that in our big metropolises. But the more you go outside of those big cities, the thinner it gets, and then the harder it gets in the winter to transport sick children to a hospital by helicopter, for example. It can be very difficult with the weather. So it's partly the system and partly the geography as well, but we are, always working to improve that. And that's against provincial jurisdiction, the healthcare. So they rely on transfers from Ottawa to fund those systems, but ultimately the provinces have to decide where to allocate their resources and on the healthcare front.
Bruce, wearing your Goldman Sachs hat for a second, where do you see the investment financial services community, Wall Street, in the going forward in 2021 and out? Do you see them being able to weather this kind of storm, if you will?
Interestingly, they're thriving. Wall Street and I think the financial markets are doing quite well in this environment. You have literally zero interest rates, and you have the Fed committed to unlimited amounts of money that would be necessary to help out those industries or those even specific companies at some point to keep them afloat through this process. And I think that they have done more than, as you mentioned, the fiscal side, which I think is still in need of some stimulus here. The important aspect of this is that the president-elect has talked about this. It's interesting how you talk about economies in the shape of letters, and we talk about, why a letter? Well, if you use a V and it goes down and back up, that means the economy went down and went back up. So if somebody says this was a V-shaped recovery, and so the president-elect is talking about this being a K-shaped, which is something entirely new. We really didn't talk about that. Mm-hmm. But what he's basically saying is those people who are doing well at the top, they have that V. If you cut off the K, it goes down and goes back up. But those people who are, at the more challenged end of our economic spectrum, they're hurting, and they're hurting really bad. And so it went down up a little bit and then now back down. And so we have a great deal of people in the millions, north of 10 million, getting closer to 20 million people who are either on some type of assistance. We have lots of jobs that will not be there when this storm passes, and will come out from the pandemic and those jobs are gone. And we now realize that they're not going to be there. And then, of course, we have this variation of, there were people who missed a whole year of school, students that they're out. And some who had great internet and bandwidth and great parental support and good family unit had great education. And then there were others who, because of the nature of the circumstances they're in, did not, and even may not even have participated in education during the year. So now we have this gap in education, this gap in healthcare, where we see it in people of color being hit so much harder. And then we have this gap in income and jobs. And so, look, I think what Wall Street needs to do now is understand, hey, it's been good for the upper end, but guys, we need investment, and we need investment from our largest banks and investment banks in the urban centers, in the communities, in the places that are disadvantaged. We need stimulus in all those retail locations that are now closed and shuttered, and restaurants, et cetera. And so will we weather it? Oh, absolutely. But how we weather it now going forward, we've got to close that widening gap between the haves and the have-nots. And I think Wall Street needs to take on some of that responsibility.
Great. This has been incredibly stimulating. Thank you to our panelists, Ambassador Bruce Heyman and Anna Gainey, for your time and expertise. As ACYPL's exchange work continues on a virtual basis, it's crucial to measure the impact of these town hall series with our partners, including the U.S. Department of State, who Bruce and I were both involved with. So to do this, audience members will be asked to complete a brief survey on Zoom. When you get it in the email, please respond. Viewers on Facebook Live and YouTube can find the survey link as well in the video description. Thank you in advance for taking the survey. Thank you for attending this Facebook Live performance, and we appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.